Touchdown Tampa Bay, you're listening to the Pewtercast.
Welcome to the Pewtercast. I am Brent Allen, your host, coming to you with my good friend Ren, taking a nap Daxed. Ren, what's up, buddy?
Sleepy Time Tea. Sleepy Time Tea's up, man.
Yeah, man. Hey, listen, we are doing this at an odd time for you and I, and you were snoozing in the middle of the afternoon, almost missed the show.
Well, yes. That's what happened.
But no worries, man. You got on here. Listen, Ren, we've got a great guest on for the folks out there today.
Yep, another fresh face.
Yeah, somebody we've never had on the show. Zac Blobner from WDAE is going to be joining us from local radio station down here. It was interesting. Ren, you know far more about him than I do, being a local guy. I'm an out of town guy, so I know him from Twitter. But you kind of keyed in on him and said, "Hey, why don't we talk about this guy?"
Yeah, I did. Yeah, and yeah. I like that movie. Is that a good movie?
There you go. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. No, Sandlot. Kid's name was Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Don't care.
That's right.
Yeah. So you tapped him, and from our list, and went after him, and we had to do it at a weird time because he has a weird life. He wakes up like at 3:30 in the morning or something crazy, and is in bed like at 7 p.m.
Right.
To do his gig. So
that's about the time you and I are just wrapping up our show normally.
What?
Right about the time he's waking up is about the time.
It's pretty close.
Yeah.
It's pretty close. Yeah, for sure. But so we got it done, and we talk. If you follow him on Twitter, and his Twitter handles it, in the interview and all that stuff, and he works for 620 or 95.7. I always call it 620.
I just call it WDAE.
All right, there we go.
Yeah.
WDAE is the local sports station, and he produces a show, and he does a show on Saturday, and he also does a show, a fantasy football show on Sunday. So he's all over the place, and he's a big fan. He grew up in the area. He's been a Bucks fan, Rays fan, Lightning/Penguins fan for a real long time. So it was someone I met in training camp and talked to, and not only does he know his stuff, but it's something I sort of hinted at in the interview is like he's in a building with people that cover sports for a living. Mm-hmm. So having those conversations like in that building's got to be a lot of fun,
right?
Because that's probably all they talk about. Like they talk like Bucks, Rays, and Lightning like all day long. So we got him in here, and we asked some questions. A bad day for him. Gator alum, huge Gator homer, and today's a day that VH3 has been shown the exit.
Yeah. That news broke shortly before us getting to go. So why don't we waste no more time? We'll get into that interview with Zac Blobner, host, producer extraordinaire on WDAE. That's what we got coming up for you guys this week on the Pewtercast. Friends, let me ask you a question. When was the last time you took that special someone out on a date? How expensive was it? The average date night these days costs around $115, and that doesn't even include babysitters for the kids if you need them. Now look, I don't care who you are, that's just plain expensive, especially if you're on a budget. Well, what if I told you that you could have an incredibly fun and unique date night for the next 6 weeks, or even 6 months, for around $30 a night? Well, you can with Hunt a Killer. Hunt a Killer is the murder mystery box that immerses you in an ongoing experience in the comfort of your own home. With every box or episode, you'll dive deeper into the case, sift through the evidence and the case files, and you'll be running red string from pin to pin on a map until you crack the case and catch the killer. Now, if you've been listening to the show, you know that I've been trying out Hunt a Killer this summer, and I have just caught my first killer. Well, not just me, my wife and me. And I gotta tell you guys, we loved this game. It was so much fun. Not only are we going to be diving into the new series coming out really soon, but this time we're going to be doing it with friends. So I guess that means double dates for me for a while. Listen, guys, this is a great, cost-effective way to spend time with friends and with loved ones working together and having a good time. Now, if that sounds like fun to you, I've got a special offer from Hunt a Killer. Just go to huntakiller.com and use the code PewterCast for 20% off your first box. Again, make sure to use the code PewterCast, that's all one word, for a 20% discount and to show your support for the PewterCast. See if you have what it takes to hunt a killer. Why don't you tell us, especially for people like me who don't get to listen to you every day, a lot of our listeners are out-of-market fans. Obviously, the vast majority are there in Tampa, so a lot of our listeners know who you are already. But, tell us, where you came from, how you got into this, what brought you to Tampa, kind of your backstory getting into working here in radio in Tampa.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was born in Pittsburgh, but my backyard is Tampa. I mean, I grew up here. I went to elementary, middle school, high school, Riverview High School, shout out over in the brand new Riverview area. And, I've pretty much been in Tampa most of my life. I've been in Florida almost all of my life. And upon, kind of graduating and growing up from around here, I went to Hillsborough Community College too, so even closer. Actually, the Super Bowl back in 2008, which with the Cardinals in town, right, and the Steelers, I actually had HCC student parking on Dale Mabry's campus. So it was perfect that semester. I got lucky on that one because I got to do all the festivities and stuff around, Ray J, and I didn't have to pay for parking because I was a student. So they let me kind of use that thinking I was at the library, but really I was out watching Sports Center and stuff.
Nice.
So after HCC, I was able to hop over and transfer to the University of Florida where I got my degree. As many people that have, heard me before, I'm not shy about admitting I'm a huge homer when it comes to the Gators. That's more than anything, probably. That's the hardest part of me to kind of separate my bias from, I'll admit it. And then after I wrapped up school, I was home. I came back to the Tampa area for a few months, about half a year, give or take. Ended up getting a gig with iHeartRadio in Jacksonville with their sports station out there. Worked there for roughly 3.5, 4 years, building my resume and kind of doing stuff with their afternoon show. Kind of got some opportunities on my own, covered the Jaguars. Always wanted to come back to Tampa. Didn't think I'd be lucky enough to kind of do it as the next landing point. I figured it would just have to be down the road, God knows how long. And long story short, it just kind of worked out to where I did end up back in Tampa a few years ago. And, the rest is, as they say, history. They've kind of just let me spread my wings there and continually grow and get more opportunities. And it's been really cool covering and doing all these things with the Bucs and the other Tampa sports franchises because, again, growing up here through elementary and all the school years and everything, it's something that I grew up in the community, so I've seen it. I've made the drives. I've had the arguments. I've, been like, oh, there should be no school after the Super Bowl when the Bucs win. Like, I was around for all these things, and it's so crazy now because now, like, most of my friends that I grew up with and stuff, even my former teachers, former coworkers, they're mostly all huge Bucs fans and huge Tampa Bay sports fans. So they're watching me kind of do these things, and they're like, oh, man, I remember going to this game with you, to this tailgate with you. I remember getting sunburnt at Ray J at noon with you, like just cool stuff like that. So it's surreal in a lot of ways. And, I always tell people as fiery as the job can be at some points in good and bad ways, I don't take it for granted.
So I know there's this whole thing with being a fan, not being a fan in the media room and all that kind of stuff. But, for you personally, would you consider yourself, or maybe if you didn't have the job you did, would you be a Bucs fan or even just a Tampa sports fan in general? Or is it more towards the Eagles? You said you were born there in Philly or maybe somewhere else.
Well, Pittsburgh.
Or Pittsburgh. Okay, maybe the Steelers.
So it's funny because I had this question asked to me quite a bit, and my friends have always given me a hard time about it because I truly do, outside of the work world, consider myself pretty split down the middle. I've always been a fan of both the Tampa and the Pittsburgh teams. When it comes to baseball, growing up, I was probably a bigger Rays fan than I was a Pirates fan, and I definitely love the Rays, just as much now as I ever have. And I still pull for the Pirates. Then on the flip side, hockey's been a little bit the other way around to where I was always a bigger Penguins fan than Lightning fan. But honestly, the last few years being in this market, I've kind of started to lean back towards the Tampa Bay side, being at Amalie so much. And then when it comes to the Buccaneers and Steelers, I'm pretty much split right down the middle. You know, it's interesting because obviously NFC, AFC, I don't have to worry about them playing too much, even though they did last year on Monday Night Football. But outside of like every once in a while randomly, I wouldn't have to really pick unless it was, you know, the playoffs, or not the playoffs, but the Super Bowl, or if there was like some crazy playoff scenario where, you know, they needed Pittsburgh to lose or Pittsburgh needed the Bucs to lose or something like that. So as far as my fandom goes, I've always pulled for the Tampa teams and the Pittsburgh teams. It's hard to answer which team I would pull for in a very crucial situation until I'm in it. You know what I'm saying? Like I said, I've seen myself on both sides of the fence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do that a lot too. Like you'll be watching a Monday Night Football game, you're like, I don't care who wins, and then somebody scores and you're mad, and you're like, well, I guess I do care who wins. But you know,
that's exactly how it goes, man.
Yeah, breaking news: you have admitted to your homerism of a Florida Gator. I mean, we can't bury the lead. Vernon Hargreaves has been released by the Buccaneers. Now, even, you know, being a big as a diehard Gator fan, and then that makes you automatically a Vernon Hargreaves fan. But from what you've seen from Vernon, I mean, can you even really make an argument that this is not the right way to go?
Well, Ren, if I may jump in here before Zach gives his answer, I did find this little thing out on Twitter that is a personal statement from Zach. So, Zach, I don't know if you want to actually answer this question. An official statement says, I want to personally apologize to all Bucs fans I argued with when it comes to Vernon Hargreaves prior to season and after the Week 2 win in Carolina. I wanted to see him succeed and was overly optimistic about VH3 needing a full season. He is a bust, and Tampa is better off, as I mentioned, since London, starting the young guys, which they've been doing. And then he concludes by saying, please respect my family and I during this time of mourning. So, Zach, I'll give you an out if you don't want to answer that question.
You know, I just need some time to myself, guys. You know, the room is really dark right now. I'm listening to some Alanis Morissette. Like it's just one of those days, man. I'm eating ice cream. I'm getting over it. It's a tough day for me. No, it's funny. I saw the news obviously, and I was like, great, here it comes. I look in the studio. Tom Krasnicki, Ronnie Lane are in there, and they're already laughing. People are starting to walk into the production room, and I'm getting texts, I'm getting tweets, and I'm like, here we go. Going to be a long day. So as any smart person does, I try to get out ahead of it a little bit. I was like, I'm just going to put this statement out there. That way, maybe I won't get as many questions, regarding VH3, but it hasn't really seemed to work so far, which, fits perfectly with this. So.
Well, where are you, Zach? I mean, all right. Now answer the question.
All right.
Wait, I'm sorry. So after all that, I forgot what was the question.
Hear me out, guys. So here's the thing. Yeah. And this is what I pointed out to everybody, right? It wasn't so much that I ever thought heading into this season that Vernon was going to be a stud or a lockdown corner. Like, I never said any of that at any point. All I said was, and you guys know this because you watch the team, new coaching staff, all these new people on board. We're supposed to see things changing around it. All I said was, I want to see Vernon with not Mike Smith around, so we get Todd Bowles in, and I want to see him be healthy. Look, if he sucks, 7-8 weeks into the season with Todd Bowles as the DC, and he's healthy the whole time, then he sucks. But I just didn't feel like we were fairly giving him the opportunity to prove it one way or the other based on what happened with, Mike Smith and then again the injuries. And we gave so many other players, as I think, a media and a fan base, and just us in Tampa Bay and all around the country watching this team, like, oh, well, Bruce Arians is here. Like, all these guys have a second breath of life. I mean, we said the same things about, Noah Spence and other players, too. And I just didn't feel like Vernon was getting the same kind of opportunity to prove it one way or the other amongst the masses. Unfortunately, it didn't work out, and it's easy for people now to be like, yeah, well, he's been a bust the whole time he's been here. But I try to give guys a fair shake if I think it's injury-based or coaching/scheme-based, because those kind of things can be fixed in certain points.
Yeah, we were kind of right there with you, Zach, on this show. I think our point was just, given the injuries and given some of the things we'd seen, but also some of the few positives before the injuries had happened, there was enough to say, well, maybe there is something with Vernon, and I'd like to see more. But as you say, 9 games in, we've seen enough. And, it didn't work out, and, teams moving on, and they're doing it mid-season, which what do you make of that? The idea they're doing it right now, mid-season, as opposed to just letting the season play out and just not picking up on it later.
Yeah, pretty interesting there. And that kind of makes you think, and honestly, there's rumors that, maybe it has something to do with some locker room issues as well. Again, rumors, allegedly, but there was an issue, after the Seattle game where JPP was very upset, allegedly in the locker room and yelling at one of the other guys on the team, for some things. And, some people are speculating that Vernon was the guy he was yelling at after that. So we know Bruce Arians came out and said that Vernon was benched in this last game, the win over the Cardinals, because he didn't think he hustled on a certain play. So there's little things like that we're kind of hearing and tying to VH3. That plus, financially speaking, if you can save some money, you can figure out some stuff ahead of time. It never hurts. It's tough because I know Vernon wasn't doing a whole lot for this defense or this team. So it's not like, okay, well, they've given up on the season because they've cut him so early with, 7 games left or whatever it is. But for me, I think Bruce, no matter what he says right now, is in evaluation mode. Look, could the Bucs win out and somehow make the playoffs? Sure, absolutely. It's, crazier things have happened, as people like to say. But I think in Bruce's mind, he's a level-headed dude. Like, he gets it. We can talk about the no risk it, no biscuit stuff all day, but this is a smart man. He's won Coach of the Year twice. He's been on a million staffs with a million other very smart coaches like Bear Bryant and beyond that even, throughout the NFL. I think he's in evaluation mode, and I think he's looking at every player and every situation, and I think he had kind of made up his mind on Vernon, and so I think that's part of the reason he decided, I'm going to move on from him now. There's other things and other issues that might be occurring in our locker room because of him, and maybe it wasn't that big of a deal yet, and he thought it might become a bigger deal if he didn't nip it in the bud while it was early on enough. I don't know. But what I do know is he's in evaluation mode for the most part right now. He loved what he saw to Jamel Dean bouncing back after his first start a couple weeks ago in the Arizona game. He played really well. And I think between that and maybe Carlton Davis getting a little bit healthier, there's just certain things about the secondary and then the off the field or locker room, however you want to look at it, issues that Bruce is like, all right, I'm cool with this. We can move on from Vernon. And we can start to look forward and move on and look at some of these other guys.
Yeah, there were always sort of rumblings or rumors about Vernon. I guess the one that's been talked about the most is he's just a guy that just didn't sort of put in the work. Like, he didn't love football was the polite way of putting it. Almost like what Ronald Jones was when he showed up. He's like, okay, I'm first round draft pick. Like, where do I stand? When do you hand me the ball? Like, I'm here to score. And it's like, well, that's not really how it works, son. But I also think a big part of it is, even if they kept Vernon around and he goes, he's not a dumb guy. And we've had these conversations before with certain players, Chris Baker being one of them. If Vernon sees the writing on the wall that, he's not going to be on this team, like they bench him, and then he sees he's not going to be on the team next year, like he can, get an injury. And that's $9 million for saying, I have a soft tissue injury. I can't go. So, I think they're kind of guarding themselves against that a little bit. But talking about evaluation, you can't talk about the Buccaneers. You can't talk about evaluation. You can't talk about this year or Bruce Arians without bringing up Jameis Winston. The San Francisco game, I've gone on record saying is the worst showing for a fan's psyche that possibly could have happened. It was like, here's the ball, Jameis. You go down, score a touchdown. We win the game. New offense, new attitude. Here we go. Pick 6. And everyone's like, okay, here we go.
Yep.
And then he slowly starts to build, has a game like he had against the Cardinals in the first Panthers game, does enough to win, then a little better, then the great Rams game, and then he, the London game where it's like, okay, here it is again. And now he's starting to build up again. I guess he just broke this record of throwing first Buccaneer QB for 300 yards 4 games in a row. That's never been it. But where are you at with Jameis Winston? Like, if you were the GM, if you were, in Bruce Arians, had Bruce Arians' ear, what are you going to tell him so far and, what you're thinking going on in next year and what the organization do with this guy?
It's funny because, listening to you describe it and where you guys are at and what you're thinking of it, it feels like we're having the same conversation that we could have had last year or the year before. Some really good, some really bad. He's probably somewhere in the middle. Will it ever change? Maybe. It's such a broken record, and it's frustrating to watch. And yes, there are bright spots, but it's just so frustrating just to take it out of football for a second because it divides the fan base so much. and like not divides the fan base in a way where you have like jovial conversations with fellow Buccaneer supporters or fans, and you're like, oh, I think this, why I think this, like heated, like just awful arguments and personal attacks I see between Bucs fans like all the time because of Jameis. That part of it I hate no matter what. Before the season started, I looked at this situation and I was like, look, I like Bruce. If anybody can get Jameis to where he needs to be, it is Bruce Arians, no doubt. And I still feel that way. But I said, regardless of what happens, he's probably going to have another roller coaster season, which he has so far. And I think ultimately the Bucs aren't going to have enough to give him a long-term deal, that they're probably going to end up tagging him at some point, for 2020 and trying to get figured out for another year, because not only are you waiting to see the future of Jameis Winston, but we're all wondering what the future of Bruce Arians is going to be like. Like when he came aboard, we figured it would be, okay, maybe 2, 3, 4 years, 5 at the very most. And seeing this season kind of unwrap and not be one of the better records that they could have had, you don't know. I'd say I'm just as curious to see what happens with Bruce Arians next year as I am Jameis Winston, but logic tells you they'll both probably come back and give it one more go before the whole thing just gets blown up in 2021. Now back to Jameis and what he's done this season and kind of looking at him. I think he's gotten better under Bruce. Let me start there. I think Jameis has gotten better under Bruce, but I don't know if it's enough to change any of my thoughts, earlier in the year. And it's funny because you mentioned the San Fran games, to go back to week 1. I can't tell you how many games where it's been late in the game and Jameis has the ball in his hands, and I'm like, this is it. This is going to be his moment. This is where he turns the corner. Whatever analogy you want to slide in there, I have either sat at Raymond James, sat in front of my TV, been looking at my phone in so many different places throughout the last few years where I'm like, this is it. This is where Jameis turns it around, and we're like, he's figured it out. He's had an elite level game, and he's going to be that guy. But it never really seems to work out that way. And then every once in a while, he kind of gets close to having one of those games / moments, in my opinion, and he follows it up at some point or another with the London game, which is so far in the opposite direction that you're just like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to make of this guy. And I think ultimately Jameis Winston is a very good quarterback that hasn't shown the ability to kind of progress at a quick enough pace, whether you can say it's physical, mental. I mean, that's up to everybody's opinion. But however you slice it, his timeline of improvement is not upward enough to make him a franchise quarterback for another 5 years. Now, you want to try to throw the franchise tag on him, maybe build a little bit around the team, work with some of the money, figure something out through the draft. Fine. I'm cool with one more go at it. But I don't know how anybody can feel comfortable saying, yeah, I'll take 5 more years of what we've been doing. And I know one of the biggest things people like to point out is, well, look at the defense around him, or look at the offensive line. Look at the teams in the NFL. I mean, right now, there's a lot of quarterbacks that are doing more with little, or have in their span of, when they took over as the franchise quarterback. I mean, Deshaun Watson's one I point to a lot. They went out and got Laramie Tunsil for sure, but that offensive line's been Swiss cheese for him most of his career. And the defense has had a good pass rush, but let's not act like the Texans have been next level defense. He's a guy who's really been able to get through the inefficiencies on his team. And I think most quarterbacks in the league at one point or another have been able to overcome the inefficiencies on their team in some capacity. Jameis and it might not even be his fault. It might just be bad timing. It might just, sometimes in life there's a relationship you're in and you're not a bad person. They're not a bad person. It's just not right timing-wise. And Jameis might be a victim of that, but the honest truth is we'll never know if it was timing or not. We just know the moment that we're in, and for whatever reason, he's not able to overcome the inefficiencies around him or within him.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, like you said at the beginning, you're talking about, the back and forth with Jameis Winston, and I feel like, you and I could just have a back and forth for the next half hour. But that's the whole thing about Jameis Winston. It's the yeah, but, yeah, but this is good. Yeah, but this is bad. Yeah, but this is good. Yeah, but this is bad. So I'm just going to go ahead and move on.
And the thing is, I mean, like, to encapsulate that, because that is every conversation in every social media platform with anyone who claims to be a Bucs fan, and even people who aren't, who are going, yep, here's all the good things, yep, here's all the bad things, and guess what? You're both right. Yeah, and that's what makes it so.
That's such a great point. Nobody's wrong. Like, that's the thing. Is like, Is Jameis really good in certain ways? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Are the inefficiencies around him an issue? Absolutely. Does he throw really bad interceptions? Absolutely. Like, all the info is right, but none of us really know what that all adds up to. It's just confusing. It's a mystery.
Yeah. All right. Speaking of mysteries, I was listening to the show today, and this was sort of a hot topic on there. The mystery of Bruce Arians and how he views clock management and the value he puts timeouts with the Buccaneers. What do you make of him throwing the flag, the challenge flag when he didn't have any left? Do you even buy that he knew he didn't have any left? I'm not even sure I buy that there's a guy that's supposed to take the flag away from it. Like, I think him was like, do you have that in the team? And he goes, oh yeah. Like, I don't think he does. So where do you fall down on, because this is repetitive now. Like, you go back to the Tennessee game. I mean, everyone talks about the Giants game, and everyone's talking about this game, but no one talks about the Tennessee game where it was 4th down, they fumbled the ball, we didn't get the touchdown, but when you threw the flag, the rule is, since it was down by contact, you can't advance it. And it's 4th down anyway. You're getting the ball there no matter what. And Jameis was using the middle of the field late in the game. He threw that pick to Perryman, whose fault it is, who cares? But you didn't have to get such big chunks if you had that timeout that he wasted just so he could, thumb his nose up at the refs?
Man, it's baffling. And it's hard to talk about because I respect Bruce so much. And I do think he's a hell of a coach. Obviously, again, we talked about his accolades. But some of the stuff he's done this year has just been rookie-level stuff when it comes to the clock. And that's the thing. So let's say it was only this last game against Arizona and the challenge flag snafu, and he knew it, and he was making a point. If that was the only instance from this season that we could point to and be like, what was he thinking? Maybe I would buy into it a little bit. Maybe I'd be like, okay, yeah, I get it. But because there's so many, we're not talking even about 2 or 3. We're up to 4 or 5 or 6 issues over the season where, as fans and media members, we're sitting back watching. Clearly not as smart when it comes to coaching as a guy like Bruce Arians. I have no problem admitting that. I'm not a 2-time coach of the year. But if we can see it and we can say, this is crazy, what are you doing? It's just hard for me to believe that he's doing these things on purpose. It has to be unintentional. And 2 things. So when it comes to this game that just happened, in this first situation you were talking about with the challenge that he didn't have, that he threw to make a point, and apparently there's a guy that he has on the staff that's in charge of that could have went up to him and taken the red flag away, and Bruce was like, oh, no, I want to keep it. I have a plan. I would assume that guy does exist logically, because how would you have all the issues you've already had this season and not at some point then we need to add somebody to keep me on my toes and make sure I'm doing the right things clock management wise, and that's their only role, their only job. You would think he would add that person, but that we don't know for a fact that he did add that person. We're just trying to hypothetically think through it. And again, you would assume that he has a person on the staff that does that. However, with that being said, it just, you cannot make logic out of quote unquote making a point in an NFL regular season game when you're trying to win it, not knowing the outcome, not knowing what's going to happen on the other side. It's baffling. It's baffling to me. And beyond that, you guys know, if you look at this year's, for some of the other issues, the defensive pass interference, offensive pass interference calls, yeah, they added these rules this year to make them reviewable. I think 15% or less is getting overturned. You're crazy to even try to challenge it at this point in the year, and there's no way Bruce doesn't know that. So I don't know how to explain it.
See, Zach, that's
not good.
But Zach, that's what I want to go back to and say, well, if everybody's just going to give up on it and nobody's going to challenge it, then why even have it? You know what I mean?
I agree. That's fine.
But
that's not
something
you try to figure out in the middle of an NFL game. Yeah. Figure out that in the offseason at the rules meetings, in the NFL meetings. That's when you do that, not in the regular season game when you're trying to win.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. Brent and I have sometimes, and there's sort of this, I don't say it's called a running joke, but we have some, listeners that, will contact us through email or Twitter and say, hey, you guys need to be in there asking the questions to the media because, we don't have sort of have to see these guys after we ask the question or, jump on somebody on the podcast. We don't have to go in the locker room and then see them, I don't have to have a relationship with BA. So but I think what you were talking about, if Dirk Cutter did the things in his first year that BA's done now, he'd be on the hot seat getting run out of town with this record, and you can't even do clock management. And as you said, like with BA and his gravitas and everything that he knows, and two-time coach of the year and all that, I think we're to the point where, even with you have to quit taking BA at his, the cool uncle's word and start looking at him going, at least in this instance, this aspect, like, you're full of crap and you need to answer for these things. Because if a guy comes up to you and goes, hey, I'm taking the flag, no, I'm keeping it, I'm going to prove a point, why isn't it somebody else going up to him going, I'm sorry, you're going to throw that later so we lose a timeout? Like, that's your plan? Like, someone needs to talk him out of that. Like, what is going on?
And I hear you, and I do. And again, I was in Jacksonville. They were really bad when I was there. I've been to enough of the Bucs, post-game things, and been in those rooms. And sometimes as media, like the members that are there will press on. But, I mean, look, if you ask the question and Bruce flat out is like, no, I did it on purpose, like this was my whole plan, this is how I did it. Even if it's only a question that you ask to follow that up, you're calling him a liar to his face. And look, he might have been lying. But again, time and place. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's easy for us to sit here now and be like, look, he's probably BSing everybody. Like, there's no way. But in the room, to sit there and be like, hey, like, you're not telling the truth. Like, in certain situations with certain players and, like, off the field stuff, maybe you press a little bit. But when it's in-game management, you just realize that over the course of a 16-game season, it's just not worth the tension that you would add between you and the head coach at that point for the future games and down the road. Even if the coach is going to get fired, I mean, that's just not something done because, again, it's not worth it at the end of the day. You ask the question, he gave his answer. You can disagree with the answer. You can write whatever you want. You can say whatever you want on air about his answer, but to sit there and try to hammer him after the fact. Plus, the other thing you guys have to know, and I'm sure you guys do, you only have so much time with these coaches after the game and stuff. So if you're hammering one thing, even if there's like 4 or 5 media members, and we're all just like, no, we want more on this, we want more on this. Look, at some point, the coach is just going to walk off. He's not going to give you the answer you want. You can press him on it, but he can also say, all right, deuces, like, I'm not answering this. I already told you. I mean, you guys, look at what Belichick does in New England, right? Look at what Saban does at Alabama. These dudes just walk off the podium. They don't care. They don't have to answer anything. So you can try to press coaches, but ultimately it doesn't help anybody because they're either going to walk away or they're going to say, we're not answering any more questions. Ron Rivera just did it with Cam Newton, like yesterday. They were like, well, what about Cam? And he's like, I'm not answering anymore. What about Cam? All right, I'm gone. Like, I'm leaving. Like, it happens all the time. So you can ask these extra questions and try to get to the bottom of things more, but you'll never get the answers you want. You'll never get what you're expecting in that line of questioning.
That's what I was trying to say at the beginning of that rambling question, and I kind of lost my train of thought. Probably because I'm still a little sleepy. Brent?
Yeah, no, well, I wanted to jump back to Jameis Winston just for a second, talking more about the next contract, because one of the things that I have sort of been thinking about is, realistically, what really might the Bucs be looking to do, or what would be like maybe even a good compromise, like where we sort of said both sides are right about the whole situation. And what I keep coming back to in my mind is the idea of like a Donovan Smith type contract. It's not really a long-term contract. It's going to get him some money. It's going to give, a couple more years to try to work this out, but it's not going to lock us in for a super, super duper long time either. And, it's right here in Tampa. And then I think you have the other question of, would Jameis, what's more important to Jameis? To stay in Tampa and continue to build what is being built here, or to go where he's going to make the most money? And I don't know if you have any insight on that. Man.
Yeah. It's always money.
You think so?
Absolutely. I mean, look, there's certain like players that'll take certain discounts, and certain veterans that are like, look, I just want a chance to win a championship, yada, yada, yada. I mean, guys that are getting into their second contract, right? They get through the rookie deal. 99.99999% of the time, if not 100, they're looking to get paid. They're looking for the most money where they can get it. Now, where it gets interesting, and you see this a lot more in today's NFL, even really over the last 2 to 3 or 4 years, it's not just about the contract, it's about guaranteed money, right? Like, it's about, well, what are the stipulations? Like, what can I lock myself into? So, and we saw this with Kirk Cousins, right? Like, how much money do you want guaranteed versus how much money do you want to have on the contract in general? Like, how big of a gamble are you willing to take on yourself to not only perform but stay healthy? Mm-hmm. So that's really where it gets interesting, and I think that's with Jameis where it would get interesting too, because a good contract to look at, and shame on me for not having it pulled up, the Jaguars extended Blake Bortles and then cut him the next season, right? And they didn't really screw themselves in any way by doing that. So that's a situation where, look, they can offer, if you're the Bucs front office and you're like, okay, well, maybe we can offer Jameis like a 3-year deal. We'll offer him more money, but we won't guarantee as much as if it was the franchise tag. So in a way, it's a better deal for them. But then Jameis has to be okay with signing it, right? Like, that's the other side of it. Mm-hmm. So Jameis can look at it and be like, okay, well, that's a good deal. I like the top number, but you're only guaranteed like 25% of this through the first year. Like, that's nothing. So that's where it gets interesting too, is you don't know what Jameis is going to do. And then one of the points I was telling you guys about making earlier is, let's say you do the 3-year deal, the bridge or whatever you want to say for the second contract. It would, if you're the Bucs, it would have to be a deal like that, like Blake Bortles had in Jacksonville, where you can get out of it. Because if Bruce does retire or does decide to move on from Jameis, him or whoever the next coach hypothetically would be has to have the flexibility to pick their own quarterback. And if you've already strapped yourself to Jameis for 2 more seasons or 3 more seasons, I guess at that point it would be more likely 2 more seasons, well, then you have a whole different set of problems on your hands. And you're talking about, at that point, almost half a decade, 5 years, by the time you get through it all and figure it all out, and the money's still going to be hurting you after the fact. So there's a lot of things to kind of situate in there, but we can assume Bruce will be back at least for next season. And we can assume that Jameis is going to be looking for more guaranteed money than they would probably offer him on one of those 3-year deals. That's why I still think the tag is the most likely scenario, because it allows them to say, okay, we'll figure this out this year. If it doesn't work, Jameis can do whatever he wants. And maybe that is in Tampa after 2020. Maybe it's not, but he has that flexibility. Bruce can do whatever he wants, and then the organization in general can do whatever they want. Everybody gets more flexibility for 2021 in an area where we really don't know what's going to happen. I mean, this year hasn't really provided us any more answers than I think last year did when it comes to the future of this franchise.
Well, not so far. Not so far. That's true.
True.
But we'll
7 games. We got some games left.
Well, yeah, it's half the season. That's some games. I mean, let's not start the yeah but thing. All right, listen. You as a sports fan have one of the best jobs for at least talking sports. Yes, your sports radio. You got your show on Saturday, and then you do a fantasy football show on Sunday, and then you produce shows. But being in that building with so many different people, it's like being in your own little private media room. So the reason I'm bringing it this way is because what I want to ask you is, what's the feeling about sort of this new look secondary going forward of Jamel Dean, Carlton Davis, and SMB? Now, I know, a lot hasn't been seen, so I didn't want to pin you down, but I'm sure you've had this conversation probably today, probably a few times since the release of Vernon Hargreaves. Like, what's the overall feeling, yours or what you've heard or what people have said that you agree with down there at the station about, how the Bucs are looking going forward back there?
Yeah, it's interesting because now with VH3 out of the picture, you obviously focus on those 3 guys specifically, and I think the dialogue about each one of them is very similar to what it was when they were drafted. Sean Murphy-Bunting, obviously, he's a guy with probably the most pressure on him being the second rounder, being the guy that was taken ahead of some other probably top-tier players that maybe could have been a part of Tampa Bay's draft last year. But he's a guy coming from a smaller school that you're wondering the learning curve. Like, how long will it take him to catch on to the NFL speed and how it works comparatively to what he dealt with in college? Those issues and questions, again, collectively, I feel like still exist, even in the building, and I certainly feel that way as well. Carlton Davis certainly feels like the strongest of the 3, the most ready of the 3. We've seen some flashes from him that, if he would have just kept his hand down a little bit lower or turned his hips a little quicker, he would have had a big play or not had a defensive pass interference in certain situations. So I think he's still the most ready. Jamel Dean is really the X factor out of the 2 because he could take either of their slots at any point. The problem with Jamel Dean is, can he stay healthy? Having multiple injuries and surgeries while he was at Auburn, when he was in, he was great. And we've seen just in a 1 week span of tape and getting to $1 and really getting healthy and ready to roll. And just his preparation has helped him bounce back in such a short window from the Seahawks game to the Arizona game. But with Jamel Dean, we could see him be a lockdown for 4 or 5 weeks and then another injury like appear. And that's kind of been the storyline with him. I feel that way still about him. Is it's not so much about his talent or size or can he be a cornerback in the NFL. Can he sustain his health through the course of a season and multiple seasons? And that's something that even if he balls out the rest of the season and we're like, yo, we have at least one good guy that's a corner in Tampa Bay and we got a couple other guys that are budding, Jamel will always be a matter of, can you stay healthy? Can you not, go back to something that plagued you in college? And that's out of his hands. You know what I'm saying? As good as he is at prepping and coming in early and studying the film, and his size is certainly a positive. Him and us have no idea if his health will hold up. And you can make that argument for any guy, but when you have the history, and that's why you kind of fall a little bit in the draft compared to where you could have been taken, that's always going to be the question mark with you. But for the most part, I would say it's honestly not any more or less optimistic than it was last year or the beginning of this season. We're still kind of in the same spot with some guys that we all, I think, collectively just hope can grow up in a hurry.
It's interesting you say that because as you talk about that, like, it's not any more optimistic or less optimistic than it was last year. Everybody's just sort of waiting to see what happens with who we've got. You talk about that being around the station. That's literally around the fandom as well. Like, I think that's ultimately when everybody boils it down, that's kind of where we are, I can remember going to the game this past week and just even over the, yes, it's been well publicized. There wasn't too many people in attendance this past week or whatnot, but just the air around the stadium was like, all right, let's see what happens. Like it was, there was a couple of plays that made people stand up and cheer and get excited. And I think the energy level for the game was certainly a lot better at the end of the game as far as being in the stands went.
It was like, it couldn't have been more different.
Right.
From kickoff to the last 5 minutes.
Yeah.
It was, it was night and day.
Yeah. So it's interesting you say that because I think that real closely, mirrors exactly what, what everyone in Bucksland is feeling,
Yeah. And unfortunately, like, I think the most frustrating part probably watching is like, even if they go out and let's say that those guys kind of continue the path they're on for the rest of this season and 2020 draft comes up and the Bucs are like, we're taking the best DB off the board in round one. Like one guy, even if they go out and sign a vet and draft a guy in the first, like that's not going to make anybody feel much better. I mean, maybe a little bit about the secondary, but the secondary is such an issue as a unit that it's not about any one guy or two guys. Like you're hoping the cohesiveness kind of happens for that unit, and it makes it hard to project, to be honest. So it's been frustrating to watch because it's such an enigma when it comes to the rest of the defense. I mean, we know the linebackers, obviously, you go out and get Devin White, and he's kind of starting to come on more and more. The pass rush has been as good as we've seen in a long time here in Tampa Bay collectively. Vita Vea really is the unsung hero there right in the middle. I know everybody wants to talk about Barrett coming around the outside and JPP back now, but just as a unit, they're good. And again, so then you get to the secondary and you're like, I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine as far as the future.
Yeah, you were talking a little bit about Dean's injury, and, Jason Light has proven that he is not afraid of taking players that have been injured in college in the draft, Sitchy, Dean, even you can all go back to Peyton Barber, who broke his foot, Bond, even Bond was injured, going into the draft. But you talked about, how Vita Vea has worked out, and we could talk about how Rojo's turning around, and we can talk about how Kappa, isn't as terrible as we thought he was last year. And then you could point to Jason Light's wins, Mike Evans, Ali Marpet, maybe OJ Howard. There's some other, Devin White looks like he's trending up. But then you get to the secondary, and then you look at this 2015 draft. Like I keep seeing this in social media, and I take that with a grain of salt. But people are like with that draft where there's only one player left now. I mean, he's not really building a resume to keep him. Like, do you feel that he's done a good enough job? Take BA out of it. We all know he's here because BA's here and they're linked together and one goes, they both go, whatever. But if BA wasn't the head coach, do you feel that Jason Light has put the Bucs in a position to turn it around fast enough, or with good enough players?
Yeah, and just real quick to that draft again. I mean, I think Ryan Smith's the only guy left. Who knows how long he'll be in Tampa Bay? And then Peyton Barber was an undrafted free agent. With the emergence of Ronald Jones, it's hard to believe that they pay him to come back next season. So I think you can pretty much assume 2020 won't have anything from that class or that year left on the table. Again, you got to look at it as a whole, though. And it's tough for me to separate it from the Bruce thing, because you know that Jay's still here because of Bruce Arians, which makes you think, well, he's going to be here next year, whether we like it or not, whatever side of the fence you're on. I think it's interesting because I think if the Bucs would have decided for whatever reason, like let's say BA was like, nah, I'm not coming out of retirement, and the Bucs knew that, I do think that there's a chance that they might have kept Dirk Cutter and fired Jason Light. I think it might have been like reversed. There was a possibility that could have happened, and then you bring in a new GM. So I think to kind of answer your question without answering your question, that Jason Light was as on thin of ice to end last year as Dirk Cutter was. And Dirk, obviously, he got fired. He didn't make it through. Jason, if it was a younger coach, if it wasn't Bruce Arians, let's say they went out and got some hotshot offensive coordinator or something and brought him in. One of the 10 guys, basically, the Cincinnati guy, Zach, what's his name? The head coach for the Bengals right now, Zach Taylor, I think. Let's say that he was the head coach and not Bruce Arians, and it was his first year in Tampa Bay. I don't think Jason Light would be brought back next year. I really don't. So I guess in theory, should he be brought back if Bruce isn't a part of the situation? Probably not. I mean, I do think he gets a harder rap than he deserves. I think he doesn't get enough credit for the areas where he did well. But again, if you're looking at it collectively, it feels more bad than good. And for every JPP that he was able to go snag in free agency, there's a Chris Baker and Deshaun Jackson, right? And that's the tough part for me, is like we can point to some of the parts where he did well, but for every guy, and that's very surface level thinking, but that's the way I'm approaching it, is like for every guy you think of that he took and you were like, yep, that's the guy, well, there's 2 or 3 that pop up that you're like, what was he doing? I'll end it on this, at least when it comes to Jason Light, and it goes back to the whole crux of the Bucs organization, right? Jason Light did one thing, and one thing that'll stick with him more than the Aguayo stuff, more than any of the secondary stuff. He has allowed Jameis Winston with these coaches to stay as the franchise quarterback. We all talk about Jameis catching on and being able to do stuff under Bruce and whoever else. A lot of people's jobs ride on what Jameis does one way or another, because if Jameis were to ever at any point in the last 3 years be benched and like they moved in a different direction, then there's no reason to keep the GM around. But on the same hand, if Jameis is starting to excel and do well and stuff, you want to keep as much in place as you have, including the GM. So I do think, as weird as this is, and maybe it's not that weird when you think about it, but I've never seen a situation so closely tied together as Jameis, Bruce, and Jason. Like, it is crazy that the head coach, the GM, and the quarterback are all like, I don't know what's going to happen in 2020. And if they all come, either none of them come back or they all come back. Like, that's crazy to me. And I can't think of another scenario off the top of my head where, like, you're looking ahead to next season for your NFL franchise and you're like, well, it's been a bad year, but we're probably going to bring the GM, head coach, and quarterback back, or we'll just not bring all 3 back. Like, the fact that those are probably the 2 options is crazy to me.
Yeah, the interesting thing about that, or I think as a fan who's followed this team, especially close for the last 5 seasons or however long we've been doing this podcast, because, man, when you start following a team this close, like, you're in it every day, 365 days a year, or 365 days a year. That's it, right? But it is simply, if they pull the plug and blow this whole thing up, then we're spinning around the cycle again. You know what I mean? Like, and there's we talk about it all the time. Like, there's so much core talent on this team that you're just pressing the nuclear reset button yet again. And I've got to believe, and honestly, for my own sake as a fan, for the future of this podcast and for the future of so many people in this town who follow this team, I don't know that I can go through that again. You know what I mean? Like, such a nuclear just destroy. I mean, unless they kind of drop it themselves, okay, maybe. But to just go, hey, GM's gone, coach is gone, quarterback's gone, we're cleaning house, we're whatever the Bengals and the Dolphins, especially the Dolphins are doing, like whatever that is.
Yeah.
I don't know that I'm in for that. Okay, yes, I am. I'm a fan, and I'm going to be in no matter what.
But what are you moving? But what are you moving on from, though? I mean, the last 3 years have been pitiful. Like,
sure.
I get what you're saying in theory as far as blowing it all up.
Yeah.
But we've seen. I mean, look at Arizona, who they just lost to the Bucs, right? They have a tie on their resume, which is the only real defining difference this season for them when it comes to heads up in Tampa Bay. But they have an exciting young coach, they have an exciting young quarterback, and they have other pieces, and they have room to work in the offseason. I mean, listen, they're having just as bad of a year record-wise, again, minus the tie, than the Bucs are. But I guarantee the fans in Arizona are a lot more optimistic. And the one thing I've learned kind of, covering the sport and again in Jacksonville and now back in Tampa Bay is it's not necessarily about hitting reset because it's not about giving up on the past. It's about giving people something new to hope for. And we talk about the fan base being split. And look, again, it might just be bad timing for Jameis. It might not even be a Jameis thing. Right. I'll say Bruce bought some time this year for the fan base to kind of hope, at least at the beginning of the season. But trust me, whatever is there, especially with all the snafus we talked about with clock management and stuff, like that's not helping his case. If it's Bruce, Jameis, and Jason again next year, whatever faith the fan base had in Bruce Arians is coming in, he's going to turn it around, there's going to be no optimism. I mean, unless they really go on a run here the second half and win, even if they somehow find a way to get to 7-9 to end the year, or better. I mean, 7-9 I think is a realistic goal to shoot for. But yeah, maybe an 8-8. If they get to that, there's some momentum. But that's a big if, because if they end up with 4 or 5 wins again, you tell me what fan should be looking ahead to next season like, oh yeah, can't wait to see what happens here. Blowing it all up isn't an awful idea at that point, because at least then you're giving the mystery of, I don't know what's going to happen. Most people are going to feel the opposite. They're going to feel like we know what's going to happen watching Bruce, Jameis, and Jason go at it for another season. And that includes the offseason. That includes free agents in the draft. I'm looking, it's funny, and I'm sure you guys do this. You go through it and you kind of check some college players. I know the Draft Network now has a mock draft simulator that you can do, and you do all this. And my buddy, one of my best friends here in Tampa Bay, diehard Bucs fan, today sent me 5 mock drafts he did. And he's like, all these are different. If the Bucs can do any of these, I know it's a ways away, but if they do any of these, they're going to be so set up to win next year. And I go, you have faith that this franchise would draft those players even if they were available in that order? And I was like, you haven't been paying attention.
I get it. I don't know that I'm not there yet. My psyche isn't there yet, because as you mentioned, there is still 7 more games left on this season. There's plenty to see what could happen. And, even despite being in a 3-6 spot, there are still some upticks. There are still some positives to be seen that the team is trending in the right direction. So why don't we close it out with this, Zach? Let's look into the crystal ball, look forward. What is it you think that we need to see over these next 7 games, realistically, that keeps everything from going nuclear? I'm not saying that doesn't mean that all 3 of them are still here. Maybe one goes, maybe not. I don't know. They probably will be, though, as you said, because I do think they're all kind of tied together. But what is it we need to see to be able to move forward, into next year, where cap space seems aplenty? We've got lots of players to re-sign. They're not as hampered by some of the stuff that they were hampered of going into this season.
Yeah, and look, again, to Bruce Arians' credit, he's fixed some of the things that we've been concerned about watching this team in general, not just this year, but over the last year. I think, a guy that we haven't mentioned once in this conversation is Matt Gay. I feel as good about the kicking as I have in a decade in Tampa Bay. So, that's an area that needs to stay steady for them, because there's going to be a game at some point here over this last stretch where Matt Gay has to step up and kick a 40-plus yarder to win it. And as good as he's been, he hasn't really been in that specific scenario since the Giants game, and we know how that played out. So that aspect of it, the special teams, the kicker especially, has to continue doing what he's doing. Because he's going to have the opportunity to at least get 1, if not 2 wins for this Bucs team down the stretch run here. On defense, it's tough to kind of say that the secondary needs to really evolve in such a short amount of time. I don't know how realistic that is. I'd just like to see some more takeaways, man. I mean, and I've always been this way when it comes to the secondary, especially now as we see guys like Patrick Mahomes, Deshaun Watson, blown up Lamar Jackson. Look, give gash plays, give the big plays, fine. But you know what? Intercept the ball, hold the other team to field goals. Like, I don't mind chunk plays that much as long as you're able to turn the ball over or hold opposing teams to field goals, especially when Jameis and the offense is going out there and they're, blowing it up on their end, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin doing their thing. So I want the defense, again, I know they're going to give up points. I know they're not going to be perfect, but if they can kind of find a way to get some more turnovers, that would, again, even if they're giving up points, if they can find a way to get some more turnovers with these youngsters, I'm all for it. And I do think with Dean and Carlton Davis, there's going to be some coming. We've already seen Devin White and obviously Levante David. We all know how good he is. The linebackers are finding a way to force turnovers. We've seen the pass rush do their job throughout the early part of the year, force turnovers. So if the secondary can just kind of do that a little bit themselves as well, even Jordan Whitehead in the mix there, that would be good on that aspect of it. For the offense, Ronald Jones specifically, we need to see him continue to grow. That's a guy who should keep getting better every week. Both on the ground and in the passing game. I know his butterfingers tend to show up from time to time. We saw it against the Arizona game when they won. He needs to hold on to the football first and foremost. But outside of that little nitpick, he's having a phenomenal year. So keep improving if you're him. Show the Bucs you can be the bell cow. And then the enigma of it all is Jameis. And that's obviously where we have to kind of get to the end because he's the guy. It starts and ends with Jameis from top to bottom. I don't know if he can do anything to silence either side. I don't know if he can be good enough to shut up the haters. I don't know if he can be bad enough to, shut up the other side. I don't know. I don't know if he can do it. But if the other things happen around him and Bruce remains confident in him and he keeps his confidence, at least we're riding into next season even keel, right? Like at the very least, we have to ride into season. And that's kind of what I expected from him again this year is to end 2019 where we started 2019, still like roller coaster. I don't know. That's not the worst thing. The worst thing is ending it with, well, crap, he definitely isn't the guy. He's definitely not the franchise QB. Like, let's say he has 2 or 3 more games like he did in London this final stretch. That would be awful. So as long as he doesn't just completely tank it and those other things happen, there's enough value there heading into next season. Look, one thing off the bat, they won't have to worry about drafting or getting a kicker. That's a spot right there. You're good, right? If you're feeling good about your secondary growing, you only maybe need to go out and get like one veteran. Maybe you can take the best offensive or defensive lineman available in the draft. Like, they're the kind of things that I just talked about collectively allow you the opportunity in free agency and in the draft to not have to reach or overpay. It allows you to fit the needs as necessary. And then we can all get excited about a few new faces and the opportunity to maybe see some of the old ones get better in 2020.
All right, well, that was Zac Blobner with WDAE. Ren, talking to him, this was a different kind of conversation than you and I normally have for our midweek interview. Normally it's somebody in the media, somebody who's there in the building day to day. This one, and I don't actually know how often Zac gets in the building or if he ever does, but this one was more sort of like just talking to you and me. Talking to us talking to us a little bit.
An extremely informed fan who talks to extremely informed people all the time. Yeah.
Exactly.
But he's not a fan.
But he is.
But he's not.
But he's not. But he is. Right.
But I will say, and this is, I rarely sort of disagree with what our guests say, these are things that they write about, they talk about, they pod about.
You kind of know what their answer is going to be before you ask it because they've usually already said it somewhere.
Yeah, and you might have heard it. We're sort of passing it along or asking, or hey, I saw you tweet this. Can you expound on this, please?
Right.
When Zac started to get into that what if of blowing the team up for hope, I almost jumped through the computer screen. And because you're talking about because you let him in with if they hit the nuclear launch button, I can't take it anymore as a fan.
Yeah.
And he's and it was a good point. It's hey, if they go 5-11, where's your hope for next year? If they blow it up, there's some generated newness because it's a mystery. Who's the head coach going to be?
Yeah.
Who's the new GM?
Yeah.
Is Jameis going to survive? Like, there's all that. But if my organization, my Tampa Bay Buccaneers, blows up this plan because they want to create intrigue and maybe generate some more ticket sales because they didn't win enough games, I will go ballistic.
No, I got to, and I got to tell you, I think it would, if they did that with the idea of generating more ticket sales, it will have the exact opposite effect.
Yeah,
people just, I'm out until they figure it out. We've already seen that. Like, we've seen that over the years, and it will just continue.
We saw it Sunday at the stadium.
We did. And, the win plus the Saints coming into town, I think there's going to be quite a few more fans there this coming week.
And black and gold.
Sure. Right. Right. But, here's the thing. If they start stringing together a couple of wins this season, that stadium will fill back up this season.
Oh, agreed.
You know what I mean?
We talked about, when Chef came on during the Instacast.
Yeah.
And we talked about how we were sort of blasé at the beginning, and I wanted to just tell the second half of the story, but we never got there because Chef had such a good call and went on for a real long time. Was that at the end of the game, like, I was all back in it to win it.
Yeah.
Like, I'm walking up and down the aisles, I'm throwing my hat, like, what do you mean pass interference? Call on Ferdinand. Right. Like, I was back, and I noticed it, and I'm like, okay, I'm back in it. So just like an addict, you just got to give me a little hit.
Yeah.
And I was right back in, man.
Right. But I mean, I get what he's saying of, like, from a cognitive standpoint of, if they go 5-11, then nothing has really changed.
You could make an argument that it would be more exciting if they blow it up, but I'm kind of with you. Like, I might just,
I can't,
and you're even like, I don't even know if I can do the pod anymore. Like,
I do. And listen, I 100% totally mean that. Like, if that, I don't know. I can't, but look, here's the thing. That's not going to happen. We know that's not going to happen. First of all, even if they do, end up 5-11, I guess they could. I don't know. But see, this is where, and what I kind of like, this is one of those, like, if I had him back on the phone, I would pull out your line, Ren. I think it all depends on how they get there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like we've already seen enough improvement over the course of this year. And I don't mean to belabor the point while Zach's not here with us to talk about it, but
it's my favorite part.
He can't defend himself, so now I'm going to talk about it.
Now that he's gone,
right.
Let me tell you how stupid that person was.
No, it's a thing. But as you said, I mean, he makes a point though. Like, there's at least a point to be argued. It's not just like here's where Zach didn't come from, and this is what I really appreciated about it. And I think this is what I was trying to get to. This isn't him in his own personal fandom, in his own personal, he never liked the BA hire, and he doesn't like Jameis, and Jason Light's the worst thing ever, so let's just get rid of them all at the end of the season. Like, He actually has a thought-out process where you can have a conversation about it and not, you talk to somebody else who just, they've already made up their mind. There's no conversation with that kind of a person.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, you can't have a discussion on
what are the three things you don't talk about in a bar, Brent?
Money.
No.
And religion. And
that's one.
The Buccaneers.
Politics, religion, and Jameis Winston.
There you go. All right, man. Well, that's I think that's going to do it. That was a good long conversation. We've had a couple of long conversations here. Usually they're about half the time.
Well, we're making stars of these people, and they're starting to realize it. So,
right.
They want to give us more than the quote unquote 15 minutes. It always gets stretched out to a half an hour anyway.
Right.
So just relax, man. Enjoy the ride.
There we go. All right, Ren, I'll give you a chance. After this, we'll go ahead and kind of close this out. We'll be back here in just a couple of days with our fan interaction show. No, actually, I don't want to go there yet. Ren, coming off the game, it's been a while since we've actually had a chance to have this conversation, but it's been a couple of days since the game. You just said, you kind of got a little hit and you got back into it. As things have kind of calmed down, do you have any final thoughts coming out of this game from this past week as we look towards really the kicking off the second half of this season so far?
I think Jameis Winston is playing a lot better than a lot of people think. I was a little surprised about how, sort of Zach was still befuddled and think that Jameis Winston's in the same place he was like 2 years ago, same conversation 3 years ago. And we decided like, we're both right. If you want, like you say, like if you want to talk about how we need to get rid of Jameis because this, and this, you're right. If you want to talk about we want to keep Jameis because this, and this, you're also right. But I think he's played. This might be the best football that he's played. With going into the new offense, recognizing what the defense has given him, getting rid of the ball, keeping two hands of the ball. I just feel like it's all coming together. And, again, and this is something we've talked about for the past few years, that it has been the defense. And if you are going to not acknowledge that, why you blame Jameis Winston, then I don't want to talk to you. Like, I'm sorry, you just said it's like you can't. At least you can have a conversation about it. But if you're going to just bang on Jameis Winston but not acknowledge how bad the defense have been and how many points he has to put up week after week after week just to maybe have a chance to win a football game, then we have to start at least there. So if we don't start there, like if you don't at least concede that. And you're one of these people that wants to get rid of Jameis Winston, like, I need you to at least start there, with me. I think he's played well. I'm really excited. What I talked about the Instacast is sort of this new three-headed monster that Zach talked about. And I thought he brought up some great points with Dean and SMB and Davis going forward. And just like I was the Instacast, and now even after talking to Zach and having this show, I'm really excited to see these guys line up against Drew Brees on Sunday and see what happens, see what shakes out.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I don't know. I keep hesitating to jump on the Jameis train, Ren. I got to be honest. But the thing is I really want to. You know what I mean?
There's no more room, Brent.
Yes, there is.
No, there's not. It's full.
No, it's not. There's a lot of room on that train.
There's nobody on this train.
There are more empty seats in that train than there were in Raymond James Stadium this past week.
I have a whole cabin to myself. By cabin, I mean actual train car. And there's 200 seats in there.
The rest of the train. No, I am excited to see where they go. I got to be honest. I don't have a whole lot of hope going into the Saints game. For the team, I don't think they're going to get 2 in a row, at least not right now. But I'll be pleasantly surprised if they do. I'll be.
What if Lattimore doesn't make it back?
I don't know that that's enough to overcome everything else that the Saints have going for them. I mean, the Saints they're such a good, tough team. And
I got to watch that Atlanta game because it's weird. Like, they only scored 9 points. That's weird.
There's been a couple of times this year where the Saints haven't scored very many points at all.
But that was with Bridgewater and their defense.
No, I think that was with Breeze too, wasn't it? Before he went out, wasn't there like one where he only had like 12 points or something on the game? No,
it was Bridgewater. He was only for a game in like a quarter.
Oh, okay.
Like, he beat the Texans in like some shootout 27-30, and then he got hurt his thumb in the next game against the Rams. But the defense was carrying him. But like, Kamara only got like 4 carries. Like, I got to kind of see what happened in that game, because it sounds like a very Bucs offense type of game where it's like, well, God, like, how come we're not throwing the ball to Mike Evans only got like 3 targets? Well, because it was, there's always something that happens. Like, well, because every time we ran the ball, it ended up being 2nd and 3. Or they were triple covering Mike and, I don't know, he had the flu. Like, there's always, I got to really look at that game to see what happened that went on. But I think we got a chance. I think we have a puncher's chance, maybe even better because they're a rival. And I don't know. I feel that even though the defense can't, again, we've been saying it for like 2 years, it can't get any worse. You know what I mean?
Right.
So with these new guys back there, and maybe we can get some turnovers and turn it into, like a Rams game.
You know what I'm excited to see, and a lot of people are going to think I'm crazy for this, but as a teacher, as an educator, as somebody who works a lot with children, and has for a very long time, and even with teenagers, there you notice this phenomenon of how like you can have like a really good class, and all of a sudden the wrong person comes in, the wrong student gets added into the mix, and it blows up the whole class. Or the exact opposite. You can have just this crazy class, but one element gets taken out of it, and then all of a sudden you have like the best class in the world. Now that they've cut VH3, I'm interested to see if that changes, if this group just gels, or if we're just in for this, oh my God, these guys are all rookies, and we're just doing nothing but playing rookies, so we got to ride the rookie roller coaster really for the rest of the year. You know what I mean?
Like when they got rid of Gerald and how the whole locker room changed?
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, I'm really curious to see how much Vernon really was affecting, not just on the field, but also just sort of around the team. And I think this game against the Saints, with as good as the Saints have been, is going to be a test of that. But at the same time, to keep in mind, for the rest of the season, we're playing a lot of rookies and a lot of second-year guys. You know, so we'll see. And I think that's why I don't have as much confidence in this coming game, but we'll see. And listen, all of that said, the offense still puts up points.
Offense will keep us in it.
If the defense can't stop them, and they haven't been, the offense will at least keep us moving and you know, at least do their share. So I'm excited for this game. I'm excited to get back to Raymond James this next weekend. And see where we're going. So, all right, Red, with that's really, we'll go ahead and close out this show now, because here in just a couple of days, we're going to come out with our fan interaction show. That's the one where we take all your emails, and we'll talk about so many more of the things that we probably didn't even think to talk about on this show. So, Ren, for right now, why don't you tell the folks where they can find you on the internet?
Best place to find me, as always, is on Twitter at Rendax, REN_DAXT. I'm always down to talk Buccaneers football.
And if you guys want to get in touch with me, you can find me at Brent Allen Live across all the social medias. And if you want to get in touch with the show, you can do that at the Pewtercast on Twitter and on Facebook. You can also email us to thepewtercast@gmail.com. iTunes reviews are always welcome, so you please do that as well. We'll also make sure we read those on upcoming show. Well, Ren, until then, listen, the Bucs win. We're still celebrating. It's victory week, and it's not something we've experienced a whole lot of this year, so we'll take it in stride and just enjoy it for the rest of the week. And I'll talk to you in just a little bit, and we'll talk to everybody else out there. And until then, go Bucs.